Joining us, everyone. We're recording this meeting and we will post the video and the other meeting materials to the project website shortly thereafter. So this is the March 11th meeting for the site advisory group. And then can you go to the next slide, Aubrey? Let's see here. On our agenda tonight, we will kick off with a project update from David Peters. Then we'll hear from our finance director, Cecilia Hune, about the budget and rates. Next up will be Dan Spiker, who is back to introduce new sample language for the Good Neighbor Agreement. And as usual, we'll save time at the end to discuss your ideas and input as a group. Let's go to the next slide. So we have some new participants tonight. So just for everyone to know that how to function in Zoom if you haven't already been here. You'll find your toolbar down at the bottom of the screen. And we ask that when you're not speaking that you mute your mic and turn off your webcam. When you have ideas to share, please use the raise your hand tool and or type in the chat. So now I will turn it over to David.
Thank you, Benita, and welcome everyone again. I was just sitting here thinking about how this is our 12th meeting online. So it's been a while, and I missed the opportunity of being with you guys, but hoping that we can meet again soon in person. Hope you're enjoying the nice spring weather we're having too, and have survived the weather we had over the past month. But as always, I like to start off with just a quick project update on some of the activities that have been going on this past month. And I think word has gotten around that we have been awarded a WIFIA loan that will help finance the Bull Run projects. And that's a lot of what we'll be talking about tonight. So we have some information that we'll share on the details of that loan and how it's helping us finance the program. We have been working on the construction and doing so in more earnestly now on the improved corrosion control project at our Lusted Hill facility. So as you drive down Cottrell over the corner on Lusted, you may see some activities that are going on there. Not huge improvements. Most of that work is confined to the site at that location. We did, as discussed the last couple months, we got our geotechnical drillers working out there along the pipeline alignments. And so they're scheduled to do work over the next about 6 weeks. I guess about 4 more weeks on the pipelines, and then they'll be moving up to the filtration facility site and doing a couple more weeks worth of work on the site itself. And so that work is going on now through March and through all of April. And it looks like there's more than 12 borings have been completed to date. So the work's been going pretty well. You may have heard from our public releases that last week council approved another property purchase, and so that purchase is in support of developing access from the north on our property out to Dodge Park Road, Dodge Park Boulevard, and so that took place this past week. And then we have our facility designers that are getting ready to start the detailed design for our filtration facility. So this past year, you've worked with us and they've been out and talked to you a number of times about the elements of that facility. And so now we're getting ready to give them direction to move forward on what to design. So they're getting lined up to start doing that. And in the meantime, we've also gotten our pipeline designers on board, and they're getting ready to do the planning for the pipeline work. So they're doing some of that's why they're doing the geotechnical boring to check the soils and collecting information they need to start the design, which we hope to get started this summer. So there are lots of things going on, and happy to answer any questions if there are any at this point, realizing that there's a lot going on there. And
Looks
there's
like
no question.
Patricia has one, David, that what will you do with the new purchase? Will it be destroyed or removed?
So that is to be worked out. So we have started some initial conversations with Multnomah County about what it takes to get an access through there. And as we work out those design details, we'll figure out what needs to happen with the structures on the properties. So we don't know the exact details of that yet. You know, we've talked about a wide variety of things, whether we can work around the facilities that are on there, whether they'll have to be removed to get roads through. And so there's a lot to figure out yet. So. And will the corrosion control be Lusted Hill be used after 2027 with after the filtration plant is online? And no, it will not. So all of those functions, those treatment functions will be part of the new facility here at the filtration facility site. We don't know what will be done with that Lusted Hill site yet. We have the engineering planning group is starting to look at what we'll do with those facilities as we move into the future.
She has a question. Why are we doing it then?
Well, good question. We are under a compliance order to improve those facilities also. So we have a compliance order with the state of Oregon that says we have to do improved corrosion control improvements to meet the lead and copper rule. And those have to be in place by 2022. So when we discussed the planning of all that and both projects when we were negotiating those agreements, and this is the way they said we needed to take these actions.
By they, you mean OHA, correct?
Yes, that's correct.
All right, any other questions for Dave?
Okay, looks like Pat.
Yes. You can type in or just chime in the audio.
Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay,
Yes.
great. Thank you. Sorry I was late. I'm a really slow typer, so it's probably better to just speak. I've been asked to ask a couple of questions, and so I'll just ask them and then you can answer. I'll unmute or I'll mute again. When does the PWB anticipate applying to Multnomah County for land use approval? And number two, how does the city justify spending all the money before being approved by the county? Thank you.
Before being approved by the county. So we anticipate that we would be applying for the land use as we get to about a 60% design on the filtration facility, which we anticipate to happen in the spring of next year. And so that's the plan we're looking at this point in time. And justify why we're spending money ahead of that land use approval is to get to the point of having enough information to be able to apply for the land use. The land use approval is based on the specific facilities that are being proposed at the site, and there'll be rules once we get that land use approval that we can vary from what's been approved. So they want as much detail as we're able to provide about the facilities that will be on the site. So they know exactly what's being approved, and you can be assured that we'll be building exactly what was approved. So that's all the money we're spending now is going towards creating that information that will go into that application and allow that approval.
Thank you, David. That kind of actually stimulates the third question. What are the odds that you would not be approved? And if that was to happen, what would your alternative be?
I don't know what the odds are. We do know, what we do know is that utilities are a conditional use in this zoning. And so it is an allowed use, but there are criteria that we have to meet. And I think what we found is that we are working towards answering all the questions to show that we can meet that criteria that are in the codes. So we feel pretty good about our ability to be able to show that we can meet the criteria that the county set out for this zone.
We have another question from a different Pat. If you have negative results from the current test, what is your next step? And what tests are you referring to, Patricia?
The testing you're doing with making the holes, that you're testing the soil, which is a current test that you're doing.
Right.
Does that answer your question?
Yes. Yes, it does. And well, what it provides for us is the details of the soils. And then that information will allow us to understand how we design the pipes through there. So if there are negative results, it's not a positive or negative result indication. It's just an indication of what the soils are. And then that will drive our design conditions. So if the soils are a little bit poor in some areas, we can do things like strengthen the pipe. There's ways to strengthen the soil in those areas that would allow us to meet the conditions that we need. So yeah, it's just giving us those indicators that we need to be able to complete the design of the pipe.
Daniel has a question. If the drilling turns up issues, what is the plan B route for the pipeline?
Well, we don't anticipate the drilling will turn up issues that we can't design around. So the soil, what we know about the soils, because we've done drilling fewer numbers of holes. Was it last year that we were out there? And so we know generally what the soils are. This is getting more specific to the alignments that we selected. And so we don't anticipate that there's anything that would prevent us from going in the alignments. This is just supporting the details of the design that we'll put together.
I'm not seeing any questions. Just give it a beat here to see any hands. Oh, no hands.
Okay.
Okay, then we'll have an opportunity at the end to ask more questions. But let's get to the show that we came here to see, and that is with the project budget and rate considerations. And we have Cecilia Hume here.
Hi, thank you. I'm Cecilia Hume, the Finance Director for the Portland Water Bureau. And first, to thank this opportunity to be before you. Next slide, please. So just starting with the priority for the Bureau, the Water Bureau's priority is to provide clean, safe, reliable, and affordable drinking water. Maintaining affordability, of course, is what I consider to be my primary responsibility as the Finance Director for the Bureau. Certainly, we want to be providing safe drinking water that meets or exceeds regulatory standards. We are about wanting to provide excellent water whenever you turn on your tap. Our priority is to provide water and make it available for public health and fire protection. We want to be maintaining our system for our current customers as well as for future generations, which requires us to be doing infrastructure improvements and doing improvements to increase our seismic resiliency to our system. And again, to this last point, certainly not my sole responsibility to be doing, but of course, all of those that are working at the Bureau. But again, one that is a high priority for me is to ensure that our resources, especially financial resources, are used wisely to ensure continued affordability by all of our customers. So again, I just kind of want to stress the point that what we're interested in doing is keeping our rates as low as we can while we're providing that safe, reliable water to our customer. And that does include, meeting all the regulatory requirements that are that we have to. Next slide, please. So as far as the utility bill, for those that do receive a utility bill from the Water Bureau from us, it is a water, sewer, and stormwater bill. And you can see the different components that are laid out there. The Water Bureau bills for not only water services, but also we do the billing for sewer and stormwater. There is a component of the bill that is for the base charge, and that essentially covers the costs related to servicing the account, taking the customer's call, getting our bills out, processing the bills. And then there's also a charge on the bill for the Portland Harbor Superfund to help with Portland Harbor cleanup. The thing that I wanted to sort of note on this slide is that blue slice of the pie, if you want to put it that way, called water system. That is the charge that we put, that's the water charge, usage charge. And as you can see, it makes up about 1/4 of the total utility bill. Next slide. And so what does that, collection of revenue that we get from our customers pays for? So the rate really is about paying for operating, maintaining our water system. Again, our ability to provide water service. And we have to, as part of maintaining our system, we have to do source protection of our 2 water supply sources. We have infrastructures in the Bull Run that we are maintaining and also needs to make improvements. Same thing with the Columbia South Shore well field. Those are very important to us. So there are not only funds that are spent in maintaining the system, operating those systems, but as well as, doing source protection. We have, of course, pump stations throughout the city to get water to our customers. We have over 2,000 miles of pipes that we have to be maintaining. And you hear about main breaks that happens during the winter time. Our crews are out there in the middle of the night to ensure that, the repairs are done, so that, again, our customers are getting the water service that they that they're paying for and that is available when they're turning on the tap. We have tanks and reservoirs throughout the city that we have to, again, maintain. Again, getting back to the priority, if we want to make water available for fire protection, we certainly are maintaining the over 14,000 hydrants that are throughout the city. And then for every account, we also have, of course, meters that we're maintaining. So in addition to, again, operating the system so that water flows through town and to our customers on a daily basis, we're also having to make investments and improvements to our system, again, to ensure that the system, the water service that we provide is reliable and resilient. And then, of course, most importantly is to, make sure that the water is clean and safe. So we have a lot of monitoring of the water that we provide, that we have to report to the states and feds about, again, ensuring that we are meeting that regulatory requirement. Again, very much a priority for us. And so the focus of, what we do as far as the spending that we do on the revenues that we receive is really back to the priorities that we have laid out for the Bureau. Next slide, please. So affordability, as I mentioned earlier, is a priority to the Bureau and a priority for me, again, to make sure that all of our customers can afford the water service that we provide. We have a financial assistance program that we provide to help with our customers, to help customers. Our financial assistance program that we have in place include giving a bill discount to qualifying low-income customers, those making a certain amount of income that would qualify. We also have once a year crisis assistance up to $500 to those that qualify. We also have what we call a safety net program, and that's assisting customers with temporary change in their income, whether it's due to sudden loss of job or family status. Leak repair assistance is another program that we also have in place to help our customers, recognizing that those that are financially struggling with their bill already, or if they have a leak, that it's likely that they won't be able to, or just isn't able to have the financial resource to do the repair. So we do also have a program in place with that. The last thing we want to do is sort of compound their utility bill with a leak. We also have, in the last couple of years, began an emergency rental assistance program. It's a partnership that we have with Home Forward that we provide now up to $650 of emergency rental assistance. And these are to renters for those living in multifamily units. I do want to stress during this time of the pandemic, we understand that many are financially impacted by the pandemic. So we have, and it's been a year that we have suspended all shutoffs of service for non-payment. And we're working with all of our customers to set up what we call interest-free payment arrangements. And that allows the customers to pay us what they can. Again, it's an interest-free payment arrangement. The way we approach it is we much rather have the customers pay us any amount that they can so that their account does not continue to build up. And when we're all coming out of the pandemic, that their account balance is so big that it becomes, again, unmanageable. So payment arrangements are certainly available to all of our customers. And that's something that we offer to all of them. So I'm going to pause here and maybe answer questions before I turn it back over to Dave.
I'm not seeing anything in the chat or any hands raised. So let me continue on with you, Dave.
Okay. So now getting specific to our project, while we're required to meet a compliance agreement with Oregon Health Authority, we have been doing that in light of the Bureau's priorities of providing clean, safe, reliable, and affordable drinking water. So, that's what we're discussing here is we're working to achieve compliance with those drinking water regulations. And that's why we're in a compliance order to remove cryptosporidium from our system. We are looking to, we have the opportunity as we do that to improve our long-term reliability, as for the supply. It'll make that surface water supply more reliable during turbidity events, after landslides or fires that may make the water more turbid. This system will be able to continue to operate, whereas in the past, when we've had events like that, we'd have to turn the supply off and go wholly to groundwater. So this will give us that reliability for the long term, and which allows us to continue to deliver that excellent water to the nearly 1 million customers that we have that use our water today. So we're, as a project team, what we're tasked with doing is managing costs to help keep the water rates as low as we can. And so that's what I'll be talking about a little bit more. The next slide. So as we've started the project, we shared with council in 2019 that we had a project budget that had accuracy range on it of +50 and -30. And that's what this chart is trying to highlight, is these dashed lines that narrow down, that look like a funnel, are that accuracy range. So the +50 going towards the top and the -30 going to the bottom. As we get through our planning and then into our design, the accuracy of the estimates will continue to get better. So as we worked with you throughout the past year, we were refining the treatment processes that would be part of this new facility. And so that is giving us the scope or the boundaries of what we'll plan on designing and eventually constructing. So now that we know kind of that set of processes that we're going to use, our estimate will be better. You know, when we started with you in 2019, we didn't know which processes would be selected or work on our system. Now we've done testing and evaluations and selected processes, and now we can begin to better refine that scope and get better costs. And that's what will happen as we continue to go through design. The arrows on this graphic, the blue arrows on the bottom indicate the filtration facility, and then the gray on the top would indicate the pipeline design. They'll kind of be working hand in hand as we go forward. We'll be getting a 30% design on the filtration facility this summer. That will be followed by the 60% design in the winter, and then the following summer, the 90% design. We are working towards our final design, labeled here as the GMP, in the fall of 2022, which is when our compliance agreement says we need to submit the design to the Oregon Health Authority. And by the time we get to that point in time, we should be within about 10% of what we believe the actual cost of that facility will be. And why I say 10% is there's always some unknowns when you get into construction. We can't anticipate everything we'll find underground. We can't anticipate some of the environmental impacts or construction, things that happen in the construction industry with materials and things. But we know a lot about the design itself and the scope, and that's why the accuracy has improved significantly by the time we get to that point. Next slide. So the number we gave to City Council in 2019 was $820 million. And as I mentioned, that was with a plus 50 and minus 30 accuracy range around that estimate. So it could be as high as $1.2 billion or as low as, what was it, $650 million. So that was the number in 2019. One thing we do know about that number is that just due to inflation, it will escalate. And that's what this slide is showing, is that over time, inflation will increase that cost out to the end of our project. And in our estimations, we've assumed that's about a 1.6% increase annually. So that's inflation on our construction, the equipment and materials that will be used, and the labor that will be part of this facility. So when Cecilia put together the rates and all the rate calculations that we've shown, it is based on an estimate at the end of the project of $950 million. So if we go to the next slide, which shows, we've been showing this slide that showed in 2028, this project would increase today's bill by $18.34. That was based on that assumption of a $950 million being spent by the end of the project. So of note, so that additional $18 a month is on top of what we might be paying today. And today's bill is roughly about $40 a month. And so by the end of the project, that'll be a little under $60 due to the increase in the project. So the yellow line on here then shows the impact of the WIFIA benefits. And that's Cecilia is going to join us now and talk about how WIFIA has allowed us to lower those bills as we move into the future. Next slide.
Okay, so WIFIA, which is Water Infrastructure Finance and Innovation Act, it's a federal program through EPA. We were certainly very excited to have closed on our loan, WIFIA loan, in early February. Some of you may have joined our announcement last week that was coordinated with EPA. Our WIFIA loan that we closed is the biggest WIFIA loan in the history of the WIFIA program. So I kind of want to cover these major points or these major benefits to our retail customers from obtaining the WIFIA loan. And you can see why we're extremely excited about this. It's, to start off, the very low interest rate. We were able to lock in this EPA loan, WIFIA loan, at 1.89% interest. And that's really lower than, the current rate of inflation. So if you sort of imagine getting a loan locked in at this rate that we can also choose to draw on over the next year at the rate that we would, that we're planning to do the investments that Dave talked about. That is a huge savings to our ratepayers, as compared to what we would have to be doing as far as borrowing through issuance of revenue bonds. So at the minimum, we're expecting to save our ratepayers $247 million of interest from debt service with this very low rate. And I do expect that we will ultimately end up saving even more because bond rates are likely to be increasing at some point. EPA used a formula to calculate this rate saving or this cost savings using the current rate. And so as bond rates increase, our savings would be actually more than just $247 million. So at least 247 is estimated at this point that we would be saving our ratepayers. The other benefit, of course, is that we do issue revenue bonds. How much are we borrowing from WIFIA? Is that the question? So and let me come back to that when on the next slide. I think it's probably more appropriate to talk about the details of the loan. But as far as the benefit, the other benefit, of course, is our repayment on the loan. The WIFIA program allows for repayment of the loan 5 years after completion of the project. And so that would be 2032 before we start paying on that WIFIA loan, which then allows us to keep rates affordable by having a much, in addition to paying for it later, also having a longer period to pay back the WIFIA loan. And then, of course, with the longer payback period, more of future ratepayers will also be paying, helping to pay for the loan and the project. So on the next slide, to answer the question, how much is the loan? Well, so let me just sort of explain that the WIFIA loan itself is based on the EPA's formula. They will loan up to 49% of the total eligible project cost. And the loan amount that we closed on is $726.6 million. And if you do the math, you would then conclude that, the total eligible cost it's a little over $1.4 billion. But what I wanted to do with this information here is to explain how we got there. As far as the direct program cost, that Dave explained, getting the filtration plant in, doing the pipeline and the improved corrosion control, that cost has not changed. It's still $820 million as it was estimated in 2019. As defined, EPA defines eligible costs to also include other costs other than direct project costs. So those are the other eligible costs. So we'll be moving into the center box. So $820 million plus what EPA allows as other eligible costs, again, for the purpose of sort of calculating the total eligible costs to count, to do that 49% for the loan. Other eligible costs includes the escalation that Dave just explained. There is, of course, an expectation that every year things cost more, not just materials, but also labor. And so there is an assumption that we included that what the escalation factor is going forward. The other thing that we have also included, unlike all of our other projects, which we do this as well, what we call overhead. And of course, we also have financing costs on all of our other capital projects. So as far as overhead, and these sort of, indirect costs, as we call it, from an accounting perspective, is very consistent with accounting practices, which includes cost of, the facilities that we are in, our administrative cost, sort of the support cost of computers, city costs, there's council costs that we also attribute to. So those are what we call indirect costs. Again, very consistent with accounting practices for capitalization purposes. And EPA has included all of those as eligible costs for the purpose of calculating the loan amount. And that's what we have included there. And then this last piece is contingency. This is sort of, again, going back to what Dave explained earlier about the confidence level of the project at this point. There's that minus 30% plus 50% confidence on the current cost. And as part of, again, very standard as far as what we do in rate forecasting, as well as all of the financial planning that we do, we are very conservative, and we also have to follow city's financial policy, which essentially says, if you're anticipating a cost, you should include it. And so, if there is a potential of plus 50% increase, then there's that contingency that we have included. And again, this is something that EPA has reviewed and approved and said this is very legit as far as where we are in the phase of the project to include the amount of contingency that we have. So 50% on 820 million is 410. And that's what's included in this loan amount. So when you start adding up the direct cost of 820 plus that escalation that Dave explained up to 950 plus 410, you're at 1.4 billion plus sort of that capitalized overhead and financing cost, which makes up another, I can't remember exactly the number, but 50 million or so. So then if you take 49% on that total eligible cost, you come to that 726.6 million that we have now locked in at 1.89% on the loan. And I'll just sort of be upfront with, that contingency that we have included in not only the WIFIA application in the loan, to calculate the loan amount, I should say, it's also in our forecasting. It's not ideal, but certainly understanding the phase of the project that we're in, that there is that confidence level that Dave explained, but it certainly is necessary to be including it in our forecasting. And it's very smart to have included it in the WIFIA loan. Because what we also learned from EPA when we were, putting our costs together is that in the end, if we end up spending less than, sort of that total eligible project cost of $1.4 billion, then more than 49% could still be used to pay for the project. So if we don't use any of that 410 million of contingency, then you can imagine that the total project cost would be closer to $1 billion. That 950 escalated plus all these other indirect costs. And we borrowed 726 million. And at this rate, our intent is to utilize all of it, probably not immediately, but at some point we will have taken out all of that amount. And so more than certainly 49% of the project could be paid for with this very low rate. And that's is certainly a very smart move on our part to be including, again, the appropriate amount of contingency based on the phase of the project that we're in currently. I'm gonna pause there to see if there's questions.
Cecilia, I just wanted to point out something too. You had said that the direct program budget was 820 for the filtration project, but there's also the improved corrosion control project in there too. That's that 20 million. I just wanted to
Yes, thank you.
Yeah.
Yes, so it would be 840. Thank you, Bonita. I am so stuck on the 820 number. Trying to relate that to the contingency number. Yes, that does include.
Does anybody have any questions? I'm looking for some hands. Not seeing any hands, or if you want to type chat, we can also take questions that way. Okay,
So-
well, moving on.
How do you, okay.
It looks like Daniel has his hand up.
Oh, okay, didn't see that. Sorry. Go ahead, Daniel.
Yeah, thanks. This may be a weird question, but that's a lot of money, and you borrow it now and you don't have to pay it back for 11 years or whatever. Where does that money reside before you start spending it and while you're spending it? I mean, I would imagine it's not just sitting in a bank somewhere. Where does that money actually sit?
So while we have locked in on the WIFI loan of that 726.6 million, we don't have that money yet.
Okay. I can tell you where my question's actually headed. That might be better. So I'm just wondering, for instance, if that money is at all at risk, let's say if the stock market dropped or something like that, or is it, yeah.
Well, are you referring to the loan then? Is whether it's at risk?
Yeah, I mean, once you start getting the money, I mean, you have to have it somewhere, or is it all on a reimbursement basis from the federal
It's on
government?
a reimbursement basis.
Okay, so the feds actually take that risk then, not the cities.
Yes, and that's the beauty of the whole program, is that that's exactly correct. We're not getting that money right now. First of all, we have to, sort of demonstrate that we have spent the money on the project. And then they review all of it. There's a huge, sort of program management on this that we have to be working with EPA on. So they haven't doled out 726 million to us.
Yeah, just curious, but the reimbursement thing answers my question. Thank you.
Yeah. Okay. And just to add to that, the nice thing about that is, since it's on a reimbursement basis, we'll be, sort of accumulating our expenses. And then when the right time comes is when we want to draw on that money, because as soon as we take money out from EPA, that's when the interest clock starts to tick. So given that it's a very low rate, we want to hold off on using that until at the right timing, when bond rates are high. Sort of the benefits that we are seeing with this program, putting this as a tool in our financial toolbox and leveraging against, the current low bond rates. The project is funded by current revenue as well as issuing bonds. And so we'll be issuing bonds to fund the project. And then we'll also be drawn on the loan when the right time comes. The right time, in my mind, is as we start to see that bond rate goes up. Another question?
Okay, Patricia, did you have a question?
Okay, oh wait, there we go.
Mhm.
All right. I guess I have a lot of questions here. I want to thank you too for all of that information regarding the cost. But now with that 820 million, now did that include the discounts that you're going to give to people who can't afford things, the rental assistance, the purchase of the 2 new homes, the fact that Gresham and Rockwood and Tualatin left the Bull Run water system, and I don't know, maybe some others of your people who are under contract to you, if they're going to leave. Was that part of the 820 million? Was that calculated in that, or is that what you're considering part of some of the contingency costs?
So Bonita, could you move to the next slide, please? Audrey. So I think what your question is really about sort of our overall rates. And what you're seeing here is the updated impact on rates from the project. The 820 million doesn't fund, it funds the cost of building the treatment plant, the pipelines, and then it does include the purchases of the properties that we have purchased so far. But as far as, the financial assistance program that we offer, that is, paid for essentially through our overall rate that we have. And when we learned of both Gresham and Rockwood leaving, likely or potentially leaving the Portland system in 2026. What we have done is incorporated that in our planning, in our forecasting, and we're able to, of course, sort of smooth that impact over multiple years as well. We, in this update of the bill impacts that you're seeing here, there are certainly other impacts to rates outside of this project. We also have, impact to rates from borrowing for doing other capital work, ongoing, annual increases related to operating and maintaining the system. So our overall rate, we have incorporated, as we updated the WIFI alone in our forecasting, we also incorporated having both Gresham and Rockwood likely to be leaving us in 2026. So our overall rate forecast has already embedded those lost revenues. What you're seeing here as far as impact on rates is primarily related to the project.
Have you heard from any of your other customers, your contract customers, other cities? Have you heard anything from them? Did Lusted, did they leave the Bull Run system? I heard they purchased some land for wells. Did they leave you too?
We have not heard from Lusted that they are intending to do so.
Okay.
And then, of course, Tualatin Valley Water District, that was something that has been known for a number of years. They've been working on their project in Willamette, their Willamette River project. So they will also be leaving post 2026.
Thank you.
Of course.
Okay, Mike. You're still on mute, Mike, if you are trying to talk. I see your hands raised. And Patricia, you can also use the reactions button to unraise your hand. You can also type in the chat, Mike. It doesn't look like you're unmuting yet, but if you want to type in the chat. Oh, no.
I was going to say, while we wait for Mike, I are a few points that I would like to make related to the slide that's on the screen now. These are projected impacts to the bill from the project. And I want to emphasize the word projected. There are a lot of assumptions that we use in our forecasting as well as financial planning. Again, those assumptions are forward thinking, right? The rate of inflation, what's the bond rate are going to be. So those are all very conservative assumptions that we have. And that's what these rates are based off of. Every year, those assumptions are updated. So while we can project, it's likely that by the time we get to any of these years, that the numbers that you're seeing on the screen are going to be different. And so I just kind of want to caution folks as they look at these numbers. This kind of gives you an indication of what the impact is on the bill from the project. But these are nowhere near, as far as precision, because we'll be updating all of our assumptions as we move forward in the years. And then to Dave's point, when we have more certainty on the project, our expectation, of course, is to be updating the impact on rates from the project as well.
Yeah, this is Mike. Can you hear me now?
Yeah, we can hear you.
Okay, I have a question on the water bills. I have my Pleasant Home Water District bill in front of me. Now I pay my water consumption, which is the rates that we're paying for our water, but we also have an extra tank fee that we have to pay. We had a new water tank built and one refurbished. Will people be seeing on their water bills a water treatment plant fee, something extra? Thank you.
So I can't speak for Pleasant Home as far as their bill, because they do their own billing. And we, of course, as a wholesale customer, we charge them a wholesale rate. And so all the fees that you're still seeing on your bill is something that they would add on. But as far as the Portland water, sewer and stormwater bill, it's likely that we will not be having a separate charge. It will be incorporated into the commodity charge rate. So earlier when I showed the pie of all the different components of the utility bills that comes from Portland Water Bureau, that blue slice will have incorporated the cost of filtration. It does now.
And that goes for the operation and maintenance of the treatment plant?
Yes.
All
Okay,
right,
thank you.
Patricia.
Yeah, something that was just said brought to mind an article that I read about when Gresham did approve the, leaving your bull run system. But it said in here that they would be on the hook for about 100 million in capital funds to complete the almost $1 billion facility. Now, is that true? Is that what they were having to pay an extra $100 million? And of course now they're not going to be part of it. So can you explain that? Was that a true statement in the Gresham Outlook?
Yeah,
you were probably counting on that, were you?
No, we were not counting on $100 million from Gresham. When I read that article, I was a little puzzled in how it was articulated. What Gresham did was to try to sort of do an apple-and-apple comparison to what they will be spending to invest in the wells to replace our source of supply to them. And the way they went about calculating and driving at the 100 million is they're roughly, again, in round numbers, 10% of our demand, the demand on our system. So they take about 10% of our total system water. And so they just sort of took, if it's 10%, applying that to the total project cost of about $1 billion for the project, then they would be quote unquote on the hook for 100 million.
Chili?
No, we would not. There was at no time were we expecting 100 million from Gresham. We would be, if they were to stay with us, and again, it wouldn't be any different than wholesale customers that are staying with us, that we would be incorporating the use of that facility, the cost, into their rates. So that, essentially, I think what they're saying is over time, they will be paying that amount, potentially.
So this rate of $12.85, this increase is what you're expecting. It doesn't have anything to do with that article. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
All right, any other questions? I see looks like Knapp has a question.
Yeah, I've got a quick question. Can you hear me?
Yeah.
I see that the rates are extrapolated out to 2028. Can you extrapolate those out to say 2038?
We do have calculations that go beyond this time frame. And again, we presented this to sort of match with the earlier presentation. But the reality is we do expect these numbers to be changing as we move forward. And then, again, there are a lot of unknowns to our rates overall based on, where we actually would be because of the assumptions going forward. So the further out, in the horizon that you look as far as forecasting either rates or even just financial planning, the less accurate they are.
Sure, I'm familiar with all those principles. Any chance I want you to show them though, that'd be handy.
I'm sorry, I'm not hearing that last piece.
I said, can you just show them? I understand that there's always, margin of error on these things, but what I'm saying is for frame of reference, we're talking about a loan that goes out, 30 odd years? What's super rates look like?
Yeah, again, it's very, the information that we would have is very preliminary.
I'm willing to look at it.
Okay.
So we can follow up on that later.
Oh, I can wait. I'm here. I mean, sharing's pretty easy.
I'm not sure that we have that information readily available, but we can certainly follow up on that. I believe your email is in our registration, so I'll be back in touch. Brian.
Yeah, hi. Thanks for calling on me. This $12.85 in 2028, you're referencing, I believe, a water bill of today that would be $40. What's the calculation, or how much volume is that based on? Because that seems like an awfully low water bill. I know mine's closer to 100 to sometimes $150 throughout the year, much higher in the summer.
Yes, again, I would ask if you're referring to your total bill. But if you're looking at your quarterly bill, so that would be 3 times out of 40. The bill that we're showing, what we're calling the typical residential customer, uses 5 units, 5 CCF.
Okay, so 5 units for $40 per month.
Per month. Yeah.
And this $12.85 is also per month, right?
That's correct.
Okay. So, what's the average consumption? Is that what your average per household is? That seems awfully low.
Yes, and we call it the typical residential customers. Yeah, but it's pretty close to the average. It is 5, maybe a little over 5. Yes, and it is. Yes, it is very low, and it is very low compared to a lot of other cities across the country. We are a very water efficient city, water use city.
So if you're double that, it's going to be double the $12.85 as well, and so on and so forth. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay. And then what's the threshold for that extreme low income customer? What do you calculate that number to be?
The extreme, the $2.56.
Yeah, what's the threshold? What's the dollar income or that?
The dollar income. Let me see if I can get this right. It is tier 2, and they get 80% of that typical bill that you're seeing. So that's essentially 20% of that $12.85 because it's discounted 80%. And the qualifying customer, based on the income, would be less than 30% of the local MFI, minimum household income.
Okay. So what's that, 30,000 or something like that, 20,000?
It would be based on household size as well.
I see.
And I think that information is on our website, so.
Okay.
Certainly follow up with that detail if you like.
Yeah, no, it would be interesting to know, because it seems like it's going to get very expensive for the people, especially living out in Pleasant Home, where they're already getting tagged with that expensive tank fee, amongst many other fees that seem to be adding on.
Yeah. So I'm glad you made that statement, because let's understand that our retail customers. So if you're getting your bill through Pleasant Home, their rates, the rate to our wholesale customer are not these rates. Those
Understood.
are very different. Okay.
Yes, but then again, it's just every person or every layer. It's just another percentage of 5, 10, 20, 30, whatever that number is. Percent.
The percentage increase to retail is not the same to the wholesale customers.
Sure. No, I understand.
Okay.
Okay. Thank you.
Sure.
We've got a question in the chat from Pat. When does PW anticipate applying? Would like that as well, please. And applying for exactly.
Sorry, that was when I started to type, but then ask my question. So ignore the first part.
Okay.
I was just following up at the end there saying, I'd like to see what the rates extrapolated out into, 2030 and beyond, if you have those numbers. I recognize that they're a guesstimate at this point, the same as the $850 million is a guesstimate, but I would still like to see what those numbers are.
Sure.
Thank you.
All right, any other questions, hands or chat? Let's see. Patricia put in the chat, I'd like to connect with other members of this group. Perhaps our opinions via email would be helpful, making us feel more connected. And she has her email in the chat. Any other questions? Let's see, Jeff says, if not successful with WIFIA, then what are the rates?
They would have been on that prior slide that Dave presented that had that yellow line that cut across. So that, I think in 2028, it was 18 something.
Yeah, Audrey, can you scooch back a couple slides?
Oh,
Yeah.
there it is.
Right, any other questions?
I think a point to make there is that we were successful with WIFIA. So this is what we know about the rates now. They will be lower than the 1834. So.
Yes, good point, Dave. Thank you.
All right, any other questions, comments?
There are a couple more slides we could run through then and then see if there's additional questions at the end. So Cecilia's talked about how we're using rates to work to try to keep the bills as affordable as we can. So the job of myself and our team is to make sure we manage costs as we're going forward. And so the cost piece is the $840 million number that was talked about, which is the three projects: the filtration facility, the pipelines, and the corrosion control. And so that's our task as we go forward. And so some of the things that are happening now to help us make that first step towards refining those estimates, we're working on a draft of a basis of design report, which will have an updated cost estimate in it. And so our designers are taking all that pre-design information that we worked on last year and shared with you throughout the year as we went through the past year, and consolidating all that and putting an estimate together around that information. So that should be available here later spring, beginning of the summer. As we go forward, we're taking several steps as we advance the design. As we have started the work on the basis of design, we did what's called a value engineering process. So we brought independent third-party people that haven't been working on the project from around the country, came in and took a look at what's been proposed and presented thoughts and ideas on how we can improve and save costs on this facility. And so we have independent folks that take a look at that and help us with ideas for managing costs. One of the things we talked about last month when we were with you, we brought the contractor and introduced their team to you. I have to say that's a very unusual step. Most of the time you won't have a contractor getting involved in your project until the design is farther along, 60% or even later through design. Here we have the opportunity to have that contractor on board as we're starting the design. And so they'll be working with us to identify what the real costs will be in the construction industry. They have their finger on the pulse of the construction industry and will be able to provide good input. They'll be able to help us identify the means and methods that they use in their construction and help us design around those means and methods. And so that marriage of the designer and the contractor early in the process will improve our ability to manage costs as we're going forward. And I see Brian has a question.
Yeah, sorry, I missed the last meeting, and I wasn't sure who you have chosen for who's the contractor.
Sure. So the contractor that's been selected is a joint venture of MWH Constructors and Kiewit Construction.
Okay, that's what I was under the impression that's who it was, but I haven't heard that to be confirmed. Thank you.
You're welcome. And so our last bullet here is that as we go through the design, we'll continue evaluating those costs, and we'll apply these management methods as a way to make sure we keep things under control and as we go forward. So next slide. So as the design progresses, we'll also be sharing more information, and I realize this says annually in the title, and it says annually because we do an annual report to City Council that we share updates on how the project's progressing and how the costs are progressing, and we do that typically towards the end of June each year. So we'll have that ongoing communication cycle with our City Council. But I think as we talked about last month, over the last couple months, we'll want to work with you on an appropriate time frame to continue to come out and meet with this group as we go forward. That will be something less than annually in an effort to keep you up to date on how the design progresses. And what we anticipate providing is just that information on how the design's going, what those estimates are as we go forward, and how the accuracy of those estimates is improving as we head towards the what we call the GMP, which is a guaranteed maximum price with our contractor. So we'll have continued attention to the project costs, and we'll be balancing those costs with the performance and capacity that we want to achieve for this facility. And all of that will get documented in the basis of design report that I mentioned should be coming out here at the beginning of the summer. And then, as Cecilia talked at length, I mean, we do really have a commitment to maintaining affordability on this, and the WIFIA loan is a huge element to help us being able to manage the impact on the rates. And I think that is shown by the difference it makes on those monthly bills. So we are going to be working hard as a team to keep those costs as we've identified.
Ryan, do you still have a question? Your hand is still raised.
I'm sorry, no. I'll figure out how to take it down.
Okay. It's in the reactions tool at the bottom.
Okay, thanks.
Okay, next slide. So I think we've shown this slide once or twice in the past. So this is just our overview, high-level overview of how we're progressing the project. So today in 2021, in the orange box, we are working towards that basis of design for the filtration facility and the pipelines. So there'll actually be two different reports, one for each effort. And we will be, we're getting ready to start the design on the facility and also the pipelines, which will start later this summer, all working towards October of 2022 when we submit the design of the filtration facility to the Oregon Health Authority. And as we do that, that will be followed quickly with our contractor providing the guaranteed maximum price, because they'll put that price together based on the information that we'll be providing to the Oregon Health Authority. And so, and then in 2023 would be when we anticipate getting the construction started, both on the facility and the pipelines. And we don't know exact dates for any of that, any of the construction start yet. That will be developed as we get farther through the design and then understand what needs to be constructed more thoroughly. And also as we get into submitting our application for the land use and factoring in the timelines for completion of that approval. So I think that we're at a point, next slide, for opening it up to any other questions on the rates and costs at this point. Looks like, Brian, you may have another question now? Nope. Okay.
Anybody else? Just checking in the chat here and looking for raised hands. All right. Well, then, Mike. You're on mute, Mike. I don't know if you know that. We can also type in the chat. Oh, there you go. You're off mute, but we don't hear you. Let's check real quick to see if there's any other questions, and while you maybe try to figure that out. Nap.
Yeah, this question is for David Peters. So the pipelines, is there a standard right-of-way width that you guys need for those pipelines?
You may need to repeat that question. It's so difficult to hear.
Okay, sorry. I said the right-of-way for the pipelines, how is there a standard width of the right-of-way for the pipelines?
There's not one width. I'll put it that way. So the easements that we own on the lower bench down by Lusted Road and coming up the hill, most of those easements are 100 feet wide. And so that'll be, that's mostly true on that, what we call the raw water side coming up to the treatment facility. On the finished water side, most of that work will be done in public right-of-ways under the roads. And the widths of those vary. So I know Dodge Park Boulevard, I want to say, is in the 60 foot range. And I know we get as small as about 30 feet as we turn the corner and go down Altman Road. So there's not one width out there. We'll be working in various conditions. And some of that is dependent where some of those areas where we have the wider easements, there may be more than one pipe. And where we have the smaller easements, it's likely only be one pipe located in those areas. So.
Do you anticipate staying within those right-of-ways is one question, and then the other would be, do you plan to go under the roads or adjacent to the roads?
So I don't know the exact location in the right-of-ways yet, but the pipes are big enough that they will be at least partially under the road. In terms of needing more more easement space than what I identified. There may be some locations where we would need what's called a temporary construction easement. And so that would be just as the pipes being installed, we may need some additional space for the size of the equipment or to be able to get traffic by while we're doing the construction. And so we may need temporary construction easements to the side of those permanent easements or right-of-ways that we would need to obtain. So we don't have details on where we'll need that or how much we'll need yet. All of that will get worked out as we go through the design.
All right. Mike, I don't know if you're able to give that a try again with your question. You can also give me a call. I know you have my phone number, so if you want to just call me and let me know what your question is, that works too. I'm not seeing any other hands raised right now. And Knapp, is that a new hand raise?
It is, yeah. Question for Cecilia on the rates that we're seeing, you know, these it's $12.80 odd cents is, I'm guessing that rate reflects the fact that the WIFIA loan, we don't even have to start paying for that for 5 years until 5 years after construction is complete. So I'm guessing that rate reflects not even starting to pay on the WIFIA loan. Is that correct?
Let's see here. I want to say yes, but not necessarily so. And I'm sort of the answer is kind of squishy, primarily because we do have the ability to smooth rates over multiple years. And so while we are not paying on that WIFIA loan until 5 years after this time frame, we are accounting for that as we're looking out far into the forecasting, knowing that debt service is coming up or that payment is coming up. So we could be, without diving into that actual calculation of our model, we could have already incorporated some of that coming forward with that payment starting. But it's likely that more of that is not in the rates here that you're seeing.
Yeah, okay. But it has been calculated and there is a model, correct?
Yes, there is a model.
Okay. Okay. And, so if you've seen the model, I mean, I guess we're not going to see it, but I'm quite curious. I mean, since you've seen it, does it increase at a similar rate? Does it go flat? What are we talking about here?
No, it does continue to go up after this. To account for that payment to for the WIFIA loan. That's correct.
Sure. Okay, so yeah, it does continue to go up. Can you just just ballpark what kind of increase in that rate are we talking about here?
I would be hesitant to try to recall all the numbers that I see. So I would have to get back to you on that information.
Yeah, okay. I mean, that seems like a really prominent number. You don't know whether it's 5%, 7%.
Like I said, I would hesitate to try to, go off of memory. I do have staff that runs the model for me. So I'm not, looking at these numbers all the time. But I do look at a lot of numbers and I don't, sometimes I get my brain gets mixed up. So I hesitate to try to recall on these.
Okay.
All right, any other questions? Do have 10 minutes left in the meeting. And I know we have another section to get to, but I know Dan can get through it pretty quickly. So, Pat.
Just a quick follow-up on that question. Could we then just generally assume that if the WIFIA loan is 50% roughly the cost of the operation, that we could look at adding 50% to that 1285, so another $6.50 roughly to that as the WIFIA loan comes on board. So in other words, I guess what I'm saying is when 2034 happens, I think that was the date that you mentioned, when that WIFIA loan comes on, then will we see a jump in the rate from the previous to the new rate with including the WIFIA loan? Does that make sense?
Yeah, I
Thank you.
what you're saying, although what you're seeing here reflects the cost of issuing revenue bonds, debt service associated with that we'll be paying when we issue bonds to help pay for the project. And that's at a very different rate than the WIFIA loan of 1.89. The other thing to also consider is that we have incorporated the operating cost associated with running the treatment plant when that's completed in 27. And of course, what we're talking about that will then come on in 2032 related to the loan is outside of all that. So I wouldn't say it's going to jump from, the $12.85 to $19, another 50%, $6, 6 something on top of that. I think that was sort of the thinking. And again, we wouldn't be looking at sort of making that jump all in 1 year. We'll be likely to be smoothing it between that time frame of 2028 and 2032. Just like we're doing with the rates here now.
Okay, and Knapp, did you have another question or?
Yeah, no, I did.
Okay.
Cecilia just mentioned the operating costs. I was wondering, so you've got a model for what the operating costs are for this treatment plant?
We have included an estimate for the projected operating cost for the plant in our.
What is the projected operating cost of the plant?
I am gonna, again, I don't remember all the numbers that goes into the model. And maybe Dave, if you may recall.
I don't have the top of my head.
Okay.
That would be something we'd need to follow back up on.
Yeah.
So I mean, I understand that, but how are you going to get back to us with that? Just so I know.
I have your email from where you registered, and I can get back to you on email.
Okay, and is that something you think is, sort of short term, or is that going to take weeks, or?
Well, the operating costs, we do have estimates of those that we should be able to provide fairly quickly.
Okay. So
they are estimates at this point, since we haven't designed.
There's always uncertainty. Yeah.
Well, I mean, we haven't even designed anything yet, so they are based on the planning work that we've done. But yeah, we do have some of that information we can get out fairly quickly.
Sure.
Pat, did you have another question?
No, that was pretty much it. Thank you.
All righty. Well, I'm looking here, and one thing's for sure is that money is complicated. That is for sure. So let's get to some less complicated stuff. Dan, bring it to the good neighbor.
Good neighbor. Yeah. Well, thank you for spending some good, fun time on rates and costs. That certainly was a lion's share of our conversation. We didn't want to forget that we're still moving towards a good neighbor agreement. And because we only have a few minutes left in our time together, I'll review a few things, but I want to let you know that you will be receiving this information via the appropriate channels through Bonita to look at these pieces of information. So I'm not going to force you to run through things quickly. I'm still going to showcase these things, but we are definitely going to be sending you information so you can read through it at your leisure. Recall that the goal of the Good Neighbor Agreement is really to foster this open communication. And really, it's designed to put together a document that will reflect what the Water Bureau's commitments are to you, the site advisory group, and completely all the neighbors. Topics, we've talked about a number of these at length: communications, architectural design, design related to lighting and sound and the landscape, stormwater, and we just touched on construction last week when we were together with the constructors, and they helped us give some perspective on that. So those are the topics that will be covered in the Good Neighbor Agreement. Next slide, please. So this is sample language for facility construction. And again, to respect our time, I'm not going to spend a lot of effort on this, but we'll certainly send this information out to you and through the appropriate channels. But what we've heard from you and your interest relative to facility construction is to, of course, think about reducing construction truck traffic. Think about traffic delays during construction and what it might do to the local traffic. Make sure there's enough signage relative to temporary lane closures and detours. Ensure access to emergency vehicles and, of course, homes and other areas during construction, and maintain condition of the road such that they're at a minimum what they are now, and even better, certainly, if that's possible. Next slide, please. Operations, same thing, things we've heard from you: implementing safety protocols for delivery and storage of treatment chemicals, and sharing any contact information for identified person at the facility who's operating. Remember Kim Gupta, she is going to be the plant manager or superintendent there. So she likely will be that person, or somebody else that she appoints to that role of being a communication person. So those are the kinds of commitments from an construction and operation standpoint that we'll be putting into play based upon your thoughts and perspectives. Next slide, please. So this is probably the most important part that I wanted to get across in the conversation today. We have that sample information about operations and construction language that I just went through very quickly. I know it was too fast for you to really digest it. We will forward that information to you directly, and you'll have a chance to react to it, to give us very specific reactions to if that wording makes sense, if you want to improve it, if something's missing. In addition, that will be language that's made available to the broader community. So not just the site advisory group, but the broader community to get a reaction to that. We will come back in April with additional draft agreement language for all the topics, not just construction and operations, but all the topics that I mentioned at the beginning of the conversation. And then finally, with that time frame between April and June, we will have a May meeting, but it likely will not concentrate much on the Good Neighbor Agreement language itself. We'll likely have the opportunity to talk about any other subject that's important to this team. But by June, and at that June meeting, so second Thursday in June, would be a final review and the production of that Good Neighbor Agreement. And I saw a question in the chat. Will there be any language in the Good Neighbor Agreement that addresses stormwater management? Okay, good question. If that's an area that's been missing with any of the other design components, we definitely will need to incorporate that. But if I recall, there is some specific language about stormwater management as a specific topic, as highlighted here. So we'll just have to make a mental note to review that language together to make sure it's covering all the material that we think is important. Other questions or thoughts about Good Neighbor Agreement? At least in terms of, could you go back, Aubrey, to the timing slide so we remind ourselves? You'll get the material, you'll have a chance to look at it over the coming weeks, reflect upon it, respond back through the survey. We'll then have a complete view of the entire Good Neighbor Agreement language, and of course, bring that to closure with a nice bow by our June session. I'm going to turn it over to Bonita unless there's other questions to ask about this.
All righty, so I'll just follow up on that we will be posting the meeting materials to our website, and at that time you'll also be getting a the link to the survey. So this is not just for people in the site advisory group, but also for the general public. So if you just want to come back to that, just keep an eye on your email. We'll send an email out when that information is available. And you can click on the link and let us know if there is what you think about the language and if there's anything missing. Certainly we will be adding something about the stormwater management. And I just wanted to check in to see too if there's anything that you feel that you need before we start getting into that good neighbor agreement to bring closure to any of those topics. I see the stormwater. Is there anything else that you think might be missing from that list that we had? Pat, is your hand still raised from last time, or did you have something new? Okay. Think that's okay then. Well, it is 7:30, so our next meeting will be, oh, Daniel, did you have a question?
Yeah, I just put a second thing in the chat. I'm wondering if you're willing to put something in the stormwater good neighbor agreement section that says that due to the construction, there will be no net increase in flooding intensity and duration to adjacent properties, or something to that effect.
What do you think about that, Dave? Is that a commitment we could make?
Or at least think about it and come back next time, because I know that's an awful big thing to ask. So, but
Yeah.
I'm sure especially the downstream property owners will want something like that.
Right. Well, we can certainly take a look at what the plans are and see how close we can get to some language like that. Certainly.
Thank you.
And I know we may get some other ideas from you, and I know we're coming to talk to you some more about those things here in the near future. So.
All right. Any other last comments or questions?
I have a quick one,
Sure.
if you don't mind. What is the legal obligations of Portland Water Bureau in crafting and providing a finished good neighbor agreement?
We don't have any legal obligation to do it. To create a,
Okay, so this is essentially all just a feel-good exercise.
well, we hope that you can see that your thoughts have been reflected into this agreement. That
I understand, but Dan's bringing up a pretty important aspect. We have stormwater issues around here, and we have neighbors that will directly be affected by that. And that is one point. But to draft up that kind of information in a good neighbor agreement, yeah, I'm just kind of curious, where does PWB stand when the construction that gets built damages neighbors' property?
So I see David's trying to say something, so but you're kind of breaking up there.
Well, yeah.
Sorry,
No.
David, I don't mean to be putting you on the spot, but we live here. Our properties are important to us, obviously, and it's a pretty big project, to say the least. And You know, you've got a big financial commitment there, and for us, we're just small potatoes, but you know, for many of us, this property is all we have. So, you know, I think it's a fair question. What kind of legal responsibility do you have?
Well, there are legal responsibilities that we'll have to meet, and getting at the stormwater regulations. There are guidelines and regulations out there for what we need to do to protect the properties that are downstream from us. So at a minimum, we'll have to meet those. Those are requirements that are, I believe the county sets them. So I'm not the designer of this, so I'm getting a little out of my area of expertise, but there are requirements that we'll need to meet. Where what I don't know about what's been characterized there, since I'm not the designer, is how this is different than what that legal requirement is that the county sets for us, and how far beyond we might be going beyond that legal requirement. So there is a legal requirement, and we're going to protect people downstream as required by those rules. I think a lot of what you've asked and requested here may be asking us to go beyond some of those rules and requirements. And so that's the part that we kind of need to work through, in which case, if we promise to go beyond those legal limits, then that's a commitment we're making to you in an attempt to do that. So I guess there's a couple levels there. You know, even like noise and sound, there are legal limits that can be met. I think as we've talked through the good neighbor agreement elements, there's a request to have us do better than that. And so that's the balance we're trying to create here in terms of what can we do and what can we accomplish as designers on the project that might meet what you have as goals for this area. So I think that's the best answer I could come up with right now. And I guess why I say, you know, checking into the language that Daniel put there, I would need to talk to my stormwater designers and kind of understand the implications of what's been requested. And I think that's part of the conversation that Dan was describing in terms of where we want to get and the type of conversation we want to have before we get to an agreement in June and ask for everyone to participate in that. But when we have that written down and good neighbor agreement put together, that's our commitment to you as from the Water Bureau, our commitment to you of what we are really going to work to achieve on this. And I think the value of that good neighbor agreement is that you'll have that and call us out if we don't meet some of those requirements. And so that's our goal and our thought about working with you to put this together. Does that help at all, or?
Somewhat. I just would like to think through what that would actually take, because, you know, if we're in a position where we had to call you out, so to speak, on something that was not being managed properly, you know, what's the realistic opportunity that things would be addressed once the good neighbor agreement is signed and you're on your way to doing construction? I'm just trying to understand what benefit you know, what backing we would have to make sure that those things are taken care of. And you know, right now I'm not sure that I feel confident that would be, you know, addressed, but we'll see, I guess. You know, I'm just thinking about the fact that, you know, we all have a lot of risk, and in the sense that, you know, if there's damage to property, because of actions, whether or not the PWDB wants to acknowledge that they're caused by them. You know, most people that live in this area are not in a position to spend thousands of dollars with an attorney to try to get you to acknowledge your responsibility. So I may be stating what a lot of people are thinking, which is really what is it that's going to hold your feet to the fire to be honorable and do what the good neighbor agreement is designed for.
Okay. Well, that's a fair question. I think one that, how about if we spend some time addressing that as we have these next couple meetings about the good neighbor agreement. I'll bring back some more information for us to talk directly to that and see what we can offer to this group in an effort to make you feel more comfortable in having that outlet to hold us accountable. Is that a good way to describe it?
Thank you.
And if not, yeah, I think that's an appropriate topic for us to discuss over the next couple of meetings as we get to closure on this. So,
Thank you.
sure.
All right, any other final words from the group? Taking a little scan here, not seeing any hands, or I see Dean and Pat. I think we want more input than just answering questions on a survey. Well, we can certainly get into that in our next meeting. I mean, the survey is really a starting point, right? So it's a way for us to stimulate that discussion. You know, we come to these meetings sometimes and there's not, you know, it's hard to get started on what the issues are without having a starting point. So we hope that we can get to that point at our next meeting. And I also see that Dean and Pat have put their email address in the chat if you want to get together to talk about it on your own. I mean, we definitely encourage that for sure. I mean, we don't need to be the facilitator here. Please, if you take your time and talk amongst yourself, and that's going to help us tremendously. If there's any other questions or comments, I'm not seeing in the chat here, but it is 7:43, so I will let David wrap this up.
Okay. Well, thank you again for some great questions and conversation as we've gone through this. I hope this topic helped create an understanding around our costs and rates. And so I appreciate the questions. And I know there were a couple of questions that you'd like us to follow up on, and we'll do that over the next couple of days. And so I appreciate you taking the time this beautiful evening, and look forward to seeing you again next month. So have a great evening. Bye now.